There is nothing negative about agitation as long as it's constructive, if it's not hostile. And if you can sort of lift yourself above the personal opinion and always try to look into the broader term, because I think that's what we're trying to achieve here.
So what panel is this, and what was the main topic today?
Okay, so we are trying to sort of come up with the idea how we can reinvent democracy. And that doesn't mean that we throw away the democratic ideas and the democratic experience, and it doesn't mean that we feel that, well, some people feel it's in crisis and others don't. But so the group was primarily focusing on, why is it important that people can participate in democracy? Do we need sort of universal standards on accessibility to power mechanisms in a similar way as, like, at some states there was a universal standards made on how people in wheelchairs could move around, so to that type of accessibility and understanding on the decision-making processes in our communities. And we talked, last time we talked a little bit about, should we have like an absolute left, Corbyn-style left perspective, and most of us felt that was not useful. But there is a very important point that is always being raised when you talk about the technical and technocratic elements of creating structures, that you cannot forget the content. So we discussed a little bit, okay, so you need to build the basis first, because many people feel that the systems that you put the brand new politicians into and the brand new parties often make them assimilate into the old system. And so that is why we are trying to figure out, are there new models that we can invent in order to get out of this sort of sense that you have one set of policy focus, let's say a right-wing policy focus in one term, then you get right-wing, left-wing, and they undo a lot of the stuff that the right-wing did, and then the left-wing will put in their policies, and then the right-wing come and undo it, and it's very bad for the general public. So we had talked a little bit about trying to build bridges, focusing on sort of policies maybe to long-term, so that at least there is some elements that everybody agree on, so it's not constantly being eroded and torn apart like we see is happening in the United States, and probably like if you would get in some of these sort of bigger powers where you have like one party big enough to control. I think that's actually one of the unhealthiest things. It should actually be mandatory to have minority governments, but that's just my personal opinion.
Was there a main point of conflict in the panel today?
No, I just think that one of the persons coming from sort of the traditional party platforms felt that we were being too technocratic and felt that we should. While we're trying to build the structures, that we should somehow include politics in that, and I think that is just a bit of a misunderstanding. For example, if you take the power from the powerful, let's say the power of decision, the power of having the information, the power of accessibility to, influential people, it's not only about traditional class wars. We are having a very different movement of power, and it's happening very quickly. All of a sudden you have Google and Facebook and Amazon as some of the most influential people on earth, the people behind that. Whereas like 20 years ago it was entirely different set of corporations, and you have to deal with them slightly differently because they have now entirely different influence on us than maybe the oil companies. So, I think it's necessary to both look into the technical aspects on how to, create new democracy models that politics thrive within, and to help people gain understanding that they are indeed part of the system, and that the system would not exist without them, and sort of get a deep and profound understanding that democracy needs us to tend to it. And it doesn't have to be big things, it can be little things, like, report a pothole. There are web pages where you can report a pothole. So, it's been, sort of deconstructed and constructed, and I think tomorrow we'll be bringing in more sort of constructive solutions. And it's important to understand that, it is hard to motivate people to be engaged in political movements except at election time. So we have not at all still talked about how to get people engaged and feel belonging to a community of change makers between elections. So these are all stuff that's going to be very exciting to talk about tomorrow. And then, of course, today we'll be gathering data from all the other groups, which is very important in this process to be able to I've been a critic in some groups, not been able to observe so much, but to hear from other groups, because we are in general all talking about exactly the same thing, just different shades of a massive problem that we're dealing with on this planet today. And I think that in the end we're going to boil down to, very similar solutions in all the different groups.
Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.